Hello, my name is still Calorite. I am still inside, and I'm still reading Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. We're on chapter 10 today, and it's still for my mom. Happy birthday, Mom. Let's get started. I feel like I also forgot since I read this book last, which was a while ago, I also forgot that there's this much of like her as a child, because it feels like it's been quite a lot, although it's not very much of the book, but like we're like almost 100 pages in, and what's his face, Rochester, I think in an earlier video I may have called him Radcliffe at one point, because I think I was thinking of Heathcliff, who's the Wuthering Heights guy. Rochester is his name, but yeah, he hasn't even shown up yet. We're like almost 100 pages in. I don't know why that matters, but, you know, look at that. Okay, let's get started. Anyway, Chapter 10. Hitherto, I have recorded in detail the events of my insignificant existence. To the first 10 years of my life, I have given almost as many chapters. But this is not to be a regular autobiography. I am only bound to invoke memory where I know her responses will possess some degree of interest. Therefore, I now pass a space of 8 years, almost in silence. A few lines only are necessary to keep up the links of connection. When the typhus fever had fulfilled its mission of devastation at Lowood, it gradually disappeared from thence, but not till its virulence and the number of its victims had drawn public attention on the school. Inquiry was made into the origin of the scourge, and by degrees various facts came out which excited public indignation in a high degree. The unhealthy nature of the site, the quantity and quality of the children's food, the brackish, fetid water used in its preparation, the pupils' wretched clothing and accommodations. All these things were discovered, and the discovery produced a result mortifying to Mr. Brocklehurst, but beneficial to the institution. Several wealthy and benevolent individuals in the country subscribed largely for the erection of a more convenient building in a better situation. New regulations were made, improvements in diet and clothing introduced. The funds of the school were entrusted to the management of a committee. Mr. Brocklehurst, who from his wealth and family connections could not be overlooked, still retained the post of treasurer. But he was aided in the discharge of his duties by gentlemen of rather more enlarged and sympathizing minds. His office of inspector, too, was shared by those who knew how to combine reason with strictness, comfort with economy, compassion with uprightness. The school, thus improved, became in time a truly useful and noble institution. I remained an inmate of its walls after its regeneration for 8 years, 6 as pupil and 2 as teacher, and in both capacities I bear my testimony to its value and importance. During these 8 years my life was uniform, but not unhappy because it was not inactive. I had the means of an excellent education placed within my reach, a fondness for some of my studies, and a desire to excel in all, together with a great delight in pleasing my teachers, especially such as I loved, urged me on. I availed myself fully of the advantages offered me. In time I rose to be the first girl of the first class. Then I was invested with the office of teacher, which I discharged with zeal for 2 years, but at the end of that time I altered. Miss Temple, though through all changes, had thus far continued superintendent of the seminary. To her instruction I owed the best part of my acquirements. Her friendship and society had been my continual solace. She had stood me in the stead of mother, governess, and, latterly, companion. At this period she married, removed with her husband, a clergyman, an excellent man, almost worthy of such a wife, to a distant county, and consequently it was lost to me. From the day she left I was no longer the same. With her gone, every settled feeling, every association that had made Lowood in some degree home to me. I had imbibed from her something of her nature and much of her habits. More harmonious thoughts, what seemed better regulated feelings had become the inmates of my mind. I had given in allegiance to duty and order. I was quiet. I believed I was content. To the eyes of others, usually even to my own, I appeared a disciplined and subdued character. But destiny, in the shape of the Reverend Mr. Nasmyth, came between me and Miss Temple. I saw her in her traveling dress step up into a post-chaise shortly after the marriage ceremony. I watched the chaise mount the hill and disappear beyond its brow. and then retired to my own room, and there spent in solitude the greatest part of the half-holiday granted in honor of the occasion. I walked about the chamber most of the time. I imagined myself only to be regretting my loss and thinking how to repair it. But when my reflections were concluded, and I looked up and found that the afternoon was gone and evening far advanced, another discovery dawned on me. Namely, that in the interval I had undergone a transforming process, that my mind had put off all it had borrowed of Miss Temple, or rather that she had taken with her the serene atmosphere I had been breathing in her vicinity, and that now I was left in my natural element and beginning to feel the stirring of old emotions. It did not seem as if a prop were withdrawn, but rather as if a motive were gone. It was not the power to be tranquil which had failed me, but the reason for tranquillity was no more. My world had for some years been in Lowood. My experience had been of its rules and systems. Now I remembered that the real world was wide, and that a varied field of hopes and fears, of sensations and excitements, awaited those who had courage to go forth into its expanse, to seek real knowledge of life amidst its perils. I went to my window, opened it, and looked out. There were the two wings of the building. There was the garden. There were the skirts of Lowood. There was the hilly horizon. My eye passed all other objects to rest on those most remote, the blue peaks. It was those I longed to surmount. All within their boundary of rock and heath seemed prison ground, exile limits. I traced the white road winding round the base of one mountain and vanishing in a gorge between two. How I longed to follow it farther. I recalled the time when I had traveled that very road in a coach. I remembered descending that hill at twilight. An age seemed to have elapsed since the day which brought me first to Lowood, and I had never quitted it since. My vacations had all been spent at school. Mrs. Reed had never sent for me to Gateshead. Neither she nor any of her family had ever been to visit me. I had had no communication by letter or message with the outer world.
Did she send you here, Bessie?
No, indeed. But I have long wanted to see you, and when I heard that there had been a letter from you, and that you were going to another part of the country, I thought I'd just set off and get a look at you before you were quite out of my reach.
I'm afraid you're disappointed in me, Bessie.
I said this laughing. I perceived that Bessie's glance, though it expressed regard, did in no shape denote admiration.
No, Miss Jane, not exactly. You are genteel enough, you look like a lady, and it is as much as ever I expected of you. You were no beauty as a child.
I smiled at Bessie's frank answer. I felt that it was correct, but I confess I was not quite indifferent to its import. At 18, most people wish to please, and the conviction that they have not an exterior likely to second that desire brings anything but gratification.
I dare say you're clever, though, continued Bessie by way of solace.
What can you do? Can you play on the piano?
A little.
There was one in the room. Bessie went and opened it, and then she asked me to sit down and give her a tune. I played a waltz or two, and she was charmed.
The Miss Reeds could not play as well, said she exultingly.
I always said you would surpass them in learning. And can you draw?
That is one of my paintings over the chimney-piece.
It was a landscape in watercolors, of which I had made a present to the superintendent, in acknowledgment of her obliging mediation with the committee on my behalf, which she had framed and glazed.
Well, that is beautiful. Miss Jane, it is as fine as any picture Mrs. Reed's drawing master could paint, let alone the young ladies themselves, who could not come near it. And have you learned French?
Yes, Bessie, I can both read it and speak it.
And you can work on muslin and canvas?
I can.
Oh, you are quite a lady, Miss Jane. I knew you would be. You will get on with whether your relations notice you or not.
There was something I wanted to ask you. Have you ever heard anything from your father's kinsfolk, the Eyres?
Never in my life.
Well, you know Mrs. always said they were poor and quite despicable. And they may be poor, but I believe they are as much gentry as the Reeds are. For one day, nearly 7 years ago, a Mr. Eyre came to Gateshead and wanted to see you. Mrs. said you were at school 50 miles off. He seemed so much disappointed, for he could not stay. He was going on a voyage to a foreign country, and the ship was to sail from London in a day or two. He looked quite a gentleman, and I believe he was your father's brother. What foreign country was he going to, Bessie?
Oh, an island, thousands of miles off, where they make wine. The butler did tell me.
Madeira, I suggested.
Yes, that is it. That is the very word.
So he went.
Yes, he did not stay many minutes in the house.
Mrs. was very high with him. She called him afterwards a sneaking tradesman. My Robert believes he was a wine merchant. Very likely, I returned, or perhaps a clerk or agent to a wine merchant. Bessie and I conversed about old times an hour longer, and then she was obliged to leave me. I saw her again for a few minutes the next morning at Loughton while I was waiting for the coach. We parted finally at the door of the Brocklehurst Arms there. Each went her separate way. She set off for the brow of Lowood Fell to meet the conveyance which was to take her back to Gateshead. I mounted the vehicle which was to bear me to new duties and a new life in the unknown environs of Millcote. That's the end of the chapter there. Sorry about all of the, it's so weird in books of the time, that thing they do where they're like, Blankshire, they don't actually say the name of the place. I'm assuming it's so that they can write about a place that they're familiar with without offending any of the people who might live there, which I get. I've wished that I could do that as well. But it is a little weird to read out loud, though. But I'm guessing, like, if you were from England, and in the 1840s, when was this published? 1847, I think. You would know what those places are supposed to be. But I'm not from England in the 1840s, so I don't know what they are. So I apologize for saying blank so many times. Anyway, I hope you have a good day. Goodbye. I'll see you next time.